I'm Ashton Addison from BlockWest Capital for Investment Pitch Media, and today on the Crypto Coin Show, we have Valentin Pletnev, co-founder and CEO of Quasar Finance. Valentin, welcome to the show, and thank you for taking the time. Massive pleasure to be here. Thank you very much, Ashton. You're very welcome. Let's dive into investing in the Cosmos and IBC-enabled ecosystems, always looking for other solutions to just find other ways to have financial products and increasing availability for different ways to invest. And I'm really excited to learn about what your team's working on in the Cosmos-based ecosystem as well. I feel like that's a huge up-and-coming blockchain and ecosystem for apps and DeFi and everything. So let's just start off our conversation, Valentin, by hearing from you a high-level overview on the main solutions that your team has built at Quasar, and then we'll dive into everything in the Cosmos.
Absolutely. Sounds great, man. And I totally agree that Cosmos is kind of bound to be the new home of DeFi for end users moving forward. But I'd like to kind of start off with the philosophy behind Quasar. I think that's an easier and kind of a nicer way to guide into what we're building. So I saw from your Twitter that you also know about the GameStop bubble, and you've been in that exposed ecosystem, right? And what we saw there is that retail investors came together trying to basically level the playing field in the financial system, right? And it still is an uphill battle because the traditional financial system is kind of rotten from the inside out. It's almost unfixable to a certain degree. What it has, though, is the usability, and you can't argue with that. It is perfectly designed to be as easy as humanly possible to use for the end user. Unless they want to do some complicated stuff or some permission stuff, then it's basically impossible and gate-kept. So the philosophy that we have is, I started realizing if I tell people about crypto, friends of mine, family, I struggle to recommend anything to them. Because I feel like if they don't keep up with the news to the extent that I do, I don't recommend most people, they're basically going to get eaten by sharks, right? We are already way past kind of the super early adoption curve where we can argue, it's just a couple enthusiasts trading. We are in full-fledged institutions in crypto, high-frequency trading, hedge funds, quant researchers, proprietary strategies. I mean, we are completely in that zone already, right? The trade for that is introduced to crypto has long passed. And especially now, we can also see that DeFi, in some shape or form, is the future. Now, how we get to that shape or form is unclear. But I think that a lot of people can agree to the thesis that we need to enable an easy way to use DeFi and a secure way to use DeFi natively that serves people that don't have the time or want to spend a lot of time understanding DeFi. Now, that is obviously a massive challenge, but that is kind of where we are sitting at with Quasar. Quasar is built to allow end users, whether they're passive investors, DeFi curious, like probably most people listening, or complete DeFi experts, to have exposure to the best strategies that are usually gate-kept. The way we look at this is right now, the hedge funds and institutional investors have an edge over the end user because they can spend a lot of money to get the best talent, right? They have the pipelines from the universities, they have the prestige with their name. A lot of the people that kind of build the cutting edge strategies that seem to outperform anything are going to these companies, and they're working for the few, which is an easier sell for them. There's less stakeholder management. It's very predictable capital, and obviously a huge upside and return. So what we've designed is a way where we basically mimic the effect that GameStop had in the sense of a lot of people coming together and acting as, I would say, one entity, right? With one common goal. If we pool end user funds, we can be as attractive, if not more, than those hedge funds for the best strategies on the planet, right? If we can combine kind of the best quant researchers and those people and tell them, look, you don't need to work 20 hours a day. You don't need to be shouted at by people like Ken Griffin, right? You can work for common people across the globe and allow them access and to be able to profit from your strategies. Obviously, it's not a charity. You have upside on that, direct upside. You don't have someone taking a cut from you on the top, right? And that's precisely what Quasar is. It's a platform for people that know what they're doing on strategy side to be able to run and execute and create their own strategies and have ownership over them. And it's a way for DeFi curious and end users to invest into those securely and safely. And it's all made in a way and shaped in a way where it might as well be a fintech app. So we are trying to make it as humanly easy as possible, so that my goal is I can tell my mom or my dad that they should just invest into Quasar.
Very cool, Valentin. Great intro. Thank you for that. And I'd love to sort of reiterate that and dive further into that. You're right about trying to keep up with the crypto news and all the different blockchains and DeFi, and having to worry about taking control of your own funds and accidentally putting them in the wrong spot, because there's a million places you could put them in. Now, you mentioned about pooling funds and making a strategy and following a specific strategy that others have outlined. It sounds a little bit different than this, but in some way, is it more like a strategy or like a decentralized hedge fund where somebody can make a pool of certain assets and then regular users can look at different strategies and just choose one to invest into, and somebody else is sort of managing that?
So internally we sometimes use that analogy, actually, decentralized hedge fund, but it's a bit more than that. To kind of get the people that understand crypto up now, right now, we are basically allowing permissionless vault creation. And what makes us special in that sense is that the vaults are IBC enabled natively. Most of you have probably heard of the Nomad Bridge exploit that literally happened like last night, maybe a week ago when this airs. And it yet again showcases the issues of end users not fully realizing the risk they're exposed to. They think that if they buy a wrapped asset, they always hear bridges are bad, bridges are risky, but then they buy a wrapped asset and they're exposed to the same risk, right? Because that wrapped asset is just a synthetic on a different chain of where it should be, right? So with that philosophy in mind, we have native multi-chain capabilities with IBC. So for people not familiar with Cosmos, IBC, Internet Blockchain Communication, is a protocol layer communication standard where you can transfer tokens from one chain to the other natively. You can look at this the same way as the analogy I like to use is, if you use a bridge, you go to a centralized entity, you give them a gold bar, right? And then you fly to another country and that entity gives you a piece of paper in that other country that says, oh, you have that gold bar where you're originally from, but we are holding it for you, and this piece of paper guarantees that you have it. And you just better hope nobody breaks into us at night, right? Now, the way that IBC works is you have a passport, which is your token. And every time you fly to a different country, a different chain, it's almost like getting a stamp with a different ID. You still hold the same asset, it just gets a different ID depending on which country it goes to, so that it works within their borders, within their ecosystem. So that's kind of where we draw the difference, is that if you want to create a vault on Ethereum, you are bound to Ethereum, period. If you create a vault with Quasar, you can get exposure to the Cosmos ecosystem, which are like already 300 chains, and some of them tenement-enabled chains. People don't even realize that they're basically the same consensus mechanism. Polkadot, for example, is natively getting IBC soon. Polygon theoretically uses a tenement fork as well. So moving forward, we are going to be the main hub for running decentralized strategies across multiple chains without bridge risk.
Very cool. And I was going to ask you about that in terms of the assets for users that are looking to take the next step from just holding Bitcoin and Ethereum passively. They're looking at moving into a good ecosystem like Cosmos. Obviously, they're able to utilize the Atom token, which is the Cosmos native token. But what are the other main assets that people may have heard of that work within the IBC ecosystem on Quasar?
Right. So you actually perfectly kind of segued into one of the reasons why people are very excited about Quasar. If you look at Ethereum and you want to bet on the growth of the Ethereum ecosystem, you buy Ether, because it's the gas that all of them have to use one way or another, whether it's a roll-up, a layer 2, layer 3, whatever, they all, and at the end, funnel down to using Ethereum. Cosmos doesn't have that. Cosmos is technically not a chain, right? The Atom you're talking about is a Cosmos hub chain, and that's where the problems start to arise. If people buy Atom, they don't have exposure to the ecosystem the way they would have with Ethereum, because they're just buying the native gas fee token from the Cosmos hub, which is not the biggest chain on Cosmos, and is only one of a lot of them. So that is precisely why our product makes sense for Cosmos. If we start running strategies on various Cosmos chains, we are going to start creating an index in a way. So it's like, you could call it an ETF. I call it a Cosmos index, where every single vault that's going to be launched is going to share part of its profits with the treasury, to which people can stake into with Quasar tokens and receive upside. So you can run a decentralized strategy, and it's going to be, in my opinion, the only way to get true exposure to the entire Cosmos ecosystem. But you can't just buy the native gas token. Now, granted, with interchain security coming in the future, where we're going to have a Polkadot-like model where you have a shared security model where the Cosmos Hub can secure other chains, that's going to kind of fix that issue to a certain degree, but I don't see a lot of chains using that. It's going to be the new chains coming into, it's going to be lower barrier of entry, which is really good for the ecosystem, but the well-established big ones, I see them sticking with their sovereign security. So that's kind of where we really fill the gap.
Great explanation. And there's definitely a lot to unravel for new investors. So this is a big feat in developing all this and sort of keeping up as new chains integrate IBC and the Cosmos ecosystem is up and coming compared to DeFi on Ethereum, which is much bigger than what we're seeing right now on Cosmos.
Absolutely, for good reason.
How far along is your team with actually implementing all of this? Are end users able to invest in different strategies right now? And are people able to create different strategies, or is that still in the works?
So it's still in the works, but we're very close. So we started developing this last November, which is, we're already 7 months. And we are actually launching when this podcast comes live, we have launched our internal testnet already. So that's not the public one, but it's the one where we're already running a version of our chain with independent validators. We're going to open it up month to month, and we envision a launch in November where we're going to get to a point where permissionless vault creation will be available. We're going to have at least one strategy running, and we're going to have the entire IBC ability already. Or in the future, we're actually moving to interchain accounts, but to not overcomplicate things, it's just a smoother implementation. So right now, users can't engage already, but we are very close. We have been working this for a long time. We're now a 10-person team. We fundraised 2-3 months ago. We've announced it actually last week. And we are, I'm very confident that we are going to be live this year, and people are going to be able to get the upside that we've been working on for, at that point, more than a year.
Very cool, Valentin. And I was reading into creating the strategies, or from what I understand, you're labeling them as vaults. What are the specifications for somebody to create a vault? Do you need to have some expertise, or do you just need to have the Quasar tokens? And how does that work to create a strategy for others to invest into?
Yeah, so it absolutely depends on the stage of our roadmap development and also on what they're trying to do. So, for instance, a vault can be a lot of things. It can be an automated strategy, right? It can be a DAO, just pooling funds. We don't advertise this yet, but we're going to get to a point where you can basically have DAO treasury management. An aspect that I haven't introduced that to not overcomplicate things is vaults are independently governed. So if you create a vault, you get vault shares, and if people invest into your vault, they get shares to govern that vault independently from our chain. So you can absolutely do DAO treasury management natively with our product, with our vaults, right? So that, for example, is a totally different, I would say, application and development kind of procedure than someone trying to run a fully automated, low frequency trading strategy. So what we see in the bridge between getting to a point where vault creation is 3 or 4 clicks is we're going to offer the ecosystem some CosmWasm developers, right? Because at the end of the day, the vaults are built, they're coded in CosmWasm, so Rust-based, right? They can be independently upgraded from the chain, which is also super important for keeping them independent. And we're going to assist teams in basically creating vaults. We're going to have some internal strategies where we take full care of it. We see most of the, I would say, kind of high quality, fully professionally run vaults to be 3-person teams, 1 CosmWasm developer, 1 quant strategist, and then 1 maybe one mathematician, right, or someone really going into analytics. But we also can see some vaults just being one guy that, let's say, is a media personality, maybe someone on Twitter with a lot of followers, saying, trade along with me. Mm-hmm. Now, granted, that introduces an entirely new set of issues, which is, again, why it is not a focus of ours, but it kind of showcases that vault creation is not vault creation per se. It totally depends on what you're trying.
Great explanation. And I could see how there'd be a lot of variables within that. And that leads me to a question I wanted to clarify as well. Talking about decentralized hedge funds and putting your funds in a strategy that somebody else has created. Is it the case that the end users are giving up their keys, or they have full control of their keys, and also the liquidity? Are they able to pull out any time, or is it locked in for a certain amount of time? And does that depend?
Yeah. So just quickly on the liquidity, and then I'll go to the actual permission. So liquidity, as long as liquid staking is not enabled, it is locked up to a certain degree. So they do say, you do say how long you want to lock up your tokens, but you can also, with a mild penalty, get them out earlier. There's actually more of a function of Cosmos. So if you want to kind of get your tokens out, it takes like a period of time. But again, if we have enough liquidity, we can offset someone else's deposit to let you, go out earlier and then pay a fee to the rest of the vault. Now, when it comes to the security of the vaults, it is saying it's a massive focus of ours really doesn't cut it. Because as you can imagine, if I want to build a product for my family and a majority of my entire net worth is tied up in that one project, security is not a side thought. So we've already been internally audited by Hellborn. We haven't announced that yet. We're going to publish the report soon. Hellborn is one of the most, best regarded auditors in the entire space. I'm not going to jinx it, so I'm not saying that. But so far, they have a good track record. And then on the vault specifically, it is essentially a design where you allow the vault to kind of, you can basically trade along the vault itself. So you're never giving up your keys. And you're not necessarily giving the vault creator complete independence to just, take the entire vault and transact it out to a private wallet. There's going to be multiple safety mechanisms in place. A lot of them we've already developed, and a lot of them already figured out. Some of them are still nuances where, again, it depends on what sort of vault you're creating to kind of define them. But I would just urge people to keep an eye out on our Medium, because that is a big focus. We're going to talk a lot about security, just because, again, exploits happen every day, and we can't have that happen on our platform. That pretty much. Also, there's one other aspect, which, again, is kind of a mild alpha leak, but we are looking at ways to ensure vaults from smart contract hacks. So there is ways to get insurance on smart contracts where if it gets exploited or hacked, users get compensated. Now, that doesn't cover a strategy being bad, but it takes out the entire risk factor of even the slightest amount of trust you have to put into us just by, building the blockchain, having the blockchain. That if a smart contract, if our vault standard is exploitable, you will get your funds back in those insured vaults. It cuts into yield, but again, this is for me a paramount factor to tell my parents to invest into something.
Definitely, and I completely agree that is something that most people should look into, and most of the time, cutting your yield a little bit for the security of actually having your funds is worth it. Because as we've seen in these centralized finance yield platforms, some small amount of yield for 4 or 6% to happen to lose 100% of your funds is not worth it at all. So a slight cut is definitely something that everyone should consider. And I'm looking forward to seeing how your team builds that out. Now, Valentin, we don't have a lot of time, but I also wanted to touch back on the Quasar token, and as that comes out, if that is required to start a strategy or to invest, and how else it's used in the ecosystem. How does it create a sustainable ecosystem for both sides of the platform?
Absolutely. So it was very paramount for us to design a Quasar token to be non-intrusive. We feel at Quasar that a lot of projects basically just create casino chips and put that token between easy usability, which, being a product that wants to be as easy to be used as possible, we can't do that, right? And we don't want to do that. So the way we've designed the Quasar token is, if you are an end user and you want to deploy money into a vault, you don't need to engage with our token at all, period. You don't need it. You can just deploy into a vault with an asset that vault accepts, whether it's Atom or Osmosis or USDC in the future. whatever it is, you don't need to touch Quasar. When it comes to yields, we are not gonna fool you into saying you have a 300% yield because we dump a lot of emissions into vaults to boost them with our own token being distributed, right? Again, that is not something we're going to do. We'd rather go for sustainable low yield than faking high yield that could implode at any moment. Because again, the entire idea of the project is you can sleep tight and you don't have to check it daily. Mm-hmm. Now, where Quasar is needed is at two places. Number one is if you want to create a vault. It's basically like a deposit and it secures that, it makes sure that we don't have a million low quality vaults, right? Mm-hmm. So vault creation, it's not going to be a ridiculously high amount of money. So it's not going to basically disallow anybody to create a vault, but it's just a buy-in to make sure that, we can keep track of the ecosystem vaults. We can keep track of support with the ecosystem, people approaching us for certain maybe issues or features that they need. It just allows for a higher quality of what we are hosting. The second place where you need the Quasar token is for the index strategy. So if you want to be exposed to the index strategy, you're going to need the Quasar token. The way we've designed this is basically because our chain is basically an infrastructure layer for vaults and they're independently governed, it is incredibly important that we are as secure as possible. The way security works in proof of stake chains, Cosmos, is you stake your tokens with a validator. So if you have but if we build a product for end users that don't understand blockchains, how can we make sure that we are secure enough? So the solution we designed is if a user deposits an asset we accept, again, Atom, Osmo, USDC, into Quasar, into the treasury that is exposed to the vault strategies, to the index, we auto swap you for Quasar in the background and auto delegate them to validators to the same percentage points that validators were delegating were securing the network beforehand. So we don't introduce bias. So that is going to be where I see most users engaging. It's a one-click deposit. You have exposure to any strategy that we have running. You're securing the network actively and receiving emissions, which I don't think we're even going to advertise in a way, because again, too many projects say emissions are profits, right? But you're not going to be diluted doing that. And you're going to be able to vote on governance proposals without having to, because our number one goal is security first and foremost, not how much people participate if we are building for the people that don't want to check it every day.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. And thank you so much for focusing on that security aspect. Now, there's so many people that, as they're just moving from passively holding Bitcoin and Ethereum into something that is supposed to be the next step for them, and then one wrong move and they've put all their money in Celsius and lost it, or some DeFi hack and back to zero.
Yeah, and we see those as our main competitors, to be honest. We don't see other yield aggregators as who we're fighting. We're seeing the CDFI or whatever the hell they want to call themselves as the main issue, placing themselves between the user's kind of curiosity to DeFi and actual native DeFi exposure. Now, we're going to have to be honest in crypto. A lot of people don't want to hold custody of their own assets. But to take that choice away from them and trying to offer them an easier solution, which then exposes them to that unknown risk, is almost criminal. You may have seen our logo looks like an app. We are not there yet, but our vision is we're going to have an app with a fiat on-ramp, and you're going to be able to decide whether you want us to hold your keys or not. Because that should be a user's choice, and that should be not our call to make one way or another, because that way we would gate cap huge amounts of potential users.
Good to hear, Valentin. And speaking of that, developing out the app and all of these functions that are still to come, what is the best way for people to follow along with these updates and stay on top of it so they can start using the platform when it's available for them?
Absolutely. So our website is quasar.fi. You're probably going to link it in the description, I can imagine.
Yep.
We're going to have links to all our social media platforms. So we're mainly using Twitter. We have a Discord, which is already set up, but we're still looking for a community manager. We have a Medium where we have kind of way more detailed rundown explanations of what's happening. We have a knowledge hub on Notion for people that are more natively exposed to DeFi. So if you want to know the nitty-gritty details, that's where you're going to find them. And yeah, just keep up to date on Twitter. You're going to hear enough about us in the coming months, I'm sure of it. And thank you very much for hosting me, Ashton.
Great. Thank you so much, Valentin. I will leave those links in the description, and let's definitely follow up in the near future.
Absolutely. Thank you, man.